Blog Talk Radio.
The GREYS. Certain apocryphal and Gnostic texts speak of beings before the creation of Adam and Eve. These beings are called the GREYS. The creatures are singular beings, neither male nor female, dark nor light, both beautiful and terrible to behold. The GREYS break into the mortal world, each time taking back a piece of the earth to add to their domain, and each time go back to the abyss. The GREYS are in another dimension whose location corresponded to that of a literal wound in the earth. Described in certain texts as being those whose coming would herald plague and destruction, the GREYS are little children with grayish skin, completely bald, and with black eyes. They speak in a multitude of voices, both masculine and feminine, that constantly change. As they did with others before, the GREYS appear in dreams, informing of impending doom. The GREYS used advanced cloning techniques to turn barren earth wasteland into lush outposts of flora and fauna splendor. Earth became a beautiful water world with life. Early writings gave us a famous Old Testament story, the tale of Adam and Eve. The Adam and Eve narrative is also derived from earlier sources which described life under the GREYS. The God or Lord God of the Bible, Adam and Eve's story, can therefore be translated to mean the GREYS. The story of Adam and Eve is unique in that it is entirely symbolic, and through its symbols it provides an account of early human history. According to the Bible, Adam, who symbolizes first man, was created by God from the dust of the ground. This idea reflects the older belief that Homo sapiens were created partially from matter. Adam's wife, Eve, was also created artificially. They both lived in an abundant paradise known as the Garden of Eden, the ancient civilization of Atlantis. The Old Testament tells us that Adam and Eve were designed to be in God's image. Their function was to care for the lush gardens and crops owned by the GREYS. As long as Adam and Eve accepted, all their physical needs would be met, and they would be permitted to remain in their paradise indefinitely. There was, however, one unpardonable sin that they must never commit. They must never attempt to seek knowledge. Those forbidden forms of knowledge are symbolized in the story as a tree. The tree of knowledge of good and evil symbolizes the knowledge of how to regain one's spiritual freedom and divinity. Adam and Eve obeyed their masters and lived in material bliss until another party entered the scene. The intervening party was symbolized in the story as a snake. The serpent was said to be God's enemy, Satan, who had literally transformed himself into a reptile. The Bible suggests that snakes are feared and disliked today because of Satan's alleged transformation back in the Garden of Eden. However, it should be remembered that the biblical Adam and Eve story is entirely symbolic. The snake, too, was a symbol, not an actual reptile. To determine what the biblical snake represented, we must go back once again to older pre-biblical sources. When we do so, we discover that the snake symbol had two very important meanings in the ancient world. The snake represented power, and it also represented an influential organization. The serpent convinced Eve to partake of the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Eve followed the serpent's suggestion, as did Adam. The GREYS became immediately alarmed. This fruit is usually portrayed as an apple, but that is the invention of later artists. The Bible itself does not mention a specific fruit, because the fruit was only a symbol to represent knowledge. The GREYS clearly did not want mankind to begin traveling the road to spiritual freedom. The reason is obvious. The GREYS wanted slaves. It is impossible to make slaves with people who are consciously aware of their spiritual freedom and divinity. Early man's attempt to express his spiritual freedom and divinity by eating from the biblical tree therefore had to be stopped, and fast. The flaming sword symbolizes the no-nonsense measures that the GREYS undertook to ensure that spiritual repression, or rather, spiritual freedom, would never become available to the human race. To further prevent access to such knowledge, Homo sapiens were condemned to an additional fate. This was a highly effective way to deal with Adam and Eve's original sin. The GREYS intended to make humans live their entire lives and die without ever rising above the level of material existence. A common misinterpretation of the Adam and Eve story is that the original sin had something to do with sex or nudity. This confusion comes from that part of the story in which Adam and Eve eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil and immediately become ashamed of their nakedness. It was not nudity, however, that shamed them. Adam and Eve were mortified by what their nakedness represented. Ancient records depict human beings stark naked when performing tasks for their masters. The GREYS, on the other hand, were depicted as being fully clothed. The implication is that Adam and Eve felt degraded by their nakedness because it was a sign of their enslavement, not because being naked in itself is bad. Of all the animals revered in ancient human societies, none were as prominent or as important as the snake. The snake was the logo of a group which had become very influential in early human societies of both hemispheres. That group was a brotherhood dedicated to the spreading of spiritual knowledge and spiritual freedom. This brotherhood of the snake opposed the enslavement of spiritual beings, and, according to ancient writings, it sought to liberate the human race from the GREYS. The brotherhood also imparted scientific knowledge and encouraged the high aesthetics that existed in many ancient societies. For these and other reasons, the snake had become a symbol of adoration to humans, and according to ancient and biblical texts, an object of the GREYS' hatred. When we look to discover who founded the brotherhood, ancient texts point right back to that rebellious angel, Samael. Ancient tablets relate that Samael possessed profound ethical and spiritual knowledge. This was the same knowledge that was later symbolized as trees in the biblical Adam and Eve story. We therefore find Samael as the reputed culprit who tried to teach early man, Adam and Eve, the way to spiritual freedom. If Samael was a true historical personality as claimed, then he was the probable leader of the brotherhood at its founding on earth. The brotherhood may have adopted the snake as its logo because the biblical word for snake is nahash, which comes from the root word nish, meaning to decipher, to find out. Despite all their reported evil intentions, the legendary Samael and early brotherhood clearly failed to free the human race. Ancient and biblical texts related that the snake was quickly defeated by the GREYS. The Bible informs us that the serpent in the Garden of Eden was overcome before it was able to complete its mission and give Adam and Eve the fruit from the second tree. Samael, who was also symbolized as a snake, was banished to earth by his opponents to ensure that he could never again secure a widespread following among human beings. Samael's title was changed from Angel of God to Prince of Darkness. He was Satan, the devil, evil incarnate, monarch of hell, lord of vermin, prince of liars, and more. He was the mortal enemy of a supreme being and the keeper of hell. People were taught that his only intentions were to spiritually enslave everyone and that everything bad on earth was caused by him. Humans were encouraged to detect him in all of his future lives, incarnations, and to destroy him and his creations whenever he was discovered. All beliefs and practices named after him, Satanism, devil worship, etc., were horrific and degrading, that no right-thinking person would or should have anything to do with them. He and his followers were to be viewed by human beings with nothing but the utmost loathing. If Samael was a real person, then he appears to have been a genius who founded the early brotherhood, which, after its reported defeat, continued to remain a powerful force in human affairs. History indicates that the brotherhood was turned into a chilling weapon of spiritual repression and betrayal, all the way up until today. By reportedly creating the Brotherhood of the Snake, the angel Samael had helped build a trap for billions of spiritual beings on earth. The Brotherhood of the Snake has been the world's most effective tool for preserving mankind's status as a spiritually ignorant creature of toil throughout all of history. During all of that time, and continuing today, the Brotherhood and its network of organizations have remained corrupt. As we have seen, early humans were reported to be a constant headache to their masters. The creatures not only disobeyed their rulers, they often banded together and rebelled. This made human unity undesirable to Earth's rulers. It was better that humans be disunited. One of the ways in which the problem of human unity was solved is described in the biblical story of the Tower of Babel, a tale which also has its roots in early writings. These people based their entire society on the use of mechanical technology. Their cities, their homes, even their armor. The people were masters of mechanics. The ancient people were not trying to make a name, reputation for themselves. They were trying to engineer a weapon. The people now threaten to turn the weapon upon the GREYS. The implication is that they wanted to match the technological might of their hated masters. The tower itself may have been intended as the launching pad for this weapon. If analysis is accurate, we would better understand why the entities became so alarmed by the Tower of Babel and felt such a compelling need to thoroughly disunite the human race. Ancient stories and legends from other parts of the world indirectly support the Tower of Babel story. The Japanese, Alaskan, South Americans, and Egyptians have traditions stating that their earliest forefathers had either been transported by human-like gods to where the modern descendants live today, or that those gods had been the source of the local languages or writing. It may be difficult to accept Mesopotamian and biblical statements that the ancient human society had been split apart thousands of years ago in a divide and conquer effort by the GREYS, even though the divide and conquer technique is frequently used by military and political leaders on Earth during wartime. Interestingly, the technique could be used if Earth should ever colonize other planets. Earth could control another inhabited planet by pitting one native group against another. This is Vetra. Welcome to the Grand Order of Divinity.